On this day in history, we remember the remarkable individuals who shaped our world. Welcome to Who Died Today in History, where we honor their legacies. From artists to leaders, their impact lives on. If you find their stories meaningful, like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay connected. Jack Lemmon, one of the most versatile and beloved actors of Hollywood's golden and modern eras, died on June 27, 2001, at the age of 76. His passing was due to complications from bladder and colon cancer, marking a natural end to a life lived largely in the public eye. Though not sudden or shocking, Lemmon's death carried emotional weight, an emblematic farewell to a generation of actors whose artistry was rooted in emotional authenticity, not digital spectacle. Lemmon's career unfolded during a period of immense cultural transformation in America, from post-World War II optimism to the cynicism of the Vietnam era and into the consumerism of the late 20th century. He captured these shifts through characters who were ordinary yet deeply human, flawed men struggling to navigate shifting societal norms. His death reflected not just the aging of a performer, but the fading of a particular style of storytelling, earnest, character-driven cinema with social resonance. In a time increasingly dominated by high-concept franchises, Lemmon's passing served as a reminder of the human-scale stories that once defined American film. The immediate consequence of his death was a global outpouring of respect and remembrance. Fellow actors, directors, and fans commemorated his wide-ranging legacy, from his comedic brilliance in Some Like It Hot to his dramatic depth in Days of Wine and Roses. It wasn't a political moment or a historical rupture, but Lemmon's death shifted the emotional landscape of cinema. It reminded audiences of the subtlety and soul possible in film, reinforcing the power of character over spectacle. Rather than diminishing over time, Lemmon's legend has only grown. His name is often evoked when discussing actors with true emotional range, and his performances are studied in film schools and praised by critics. He continues to appear in retrospectives, and his legacy is preserved through archival interviews, award tributes, and public broadcasts of his most iconic roles. In reflecting on his death, we are reminded that humanity often finds its deepest truths in stories of vulnerability. Jack Lemmon's career and passing reflect our desire to connect through emotion, not just action. We immortalize such figures not simply because they entertained, but because they revealed us to ourselves. In art and memory, Jack Lemmon remains timeless, a mirror to the hopes, failures, and quiet courage of the human spirit. Elaine Stewart, a luminous presence of 1950s Hollywood, passed away on June 27, 2011, at the age of 81. Her death was attributed to complications from cancer, a natural end to a life that spanned decades of cultural change both in and outside of the film industry. Though her name may not resonate today with the same force as some of her contemporaries, her passing marked the fading of an era when movie stardom was defined as much by mystique and beauty as by talent. Stewart's rise coincided with Hollywood's post-war glamour period, a time when the silver screen offered escapism and idealized femininity to a nation rebuilding itself emotionally and economically. Cast in roles that emphasized allure and elegance, Stewart epitomized the visual aesthetic of the time. Her appearance in films such as The Bad and the Beautiful, 1952, and Brigadoon, 1954, placed her among a generation of actresses who were often typecast, their value largely tied to appearance. Stewart later transitioned to television, most notably as a co-hostess on game shows like High Rollers, reflecting the evolving nature of celebrity during the rise of TV culture. Her death did not make global headlines, but it subtly echoed the larger ongoing conversation about women in Hollywood, especially those whose careers were shaped and often limited by the male gaze. Stewart's career and its gradual quiet fade speaks to the transitory nature of fame during a time when actresses were expected to be glamorous but seldom allowed to evolve publicly as artists. Her passing invites reflection on how easily Hollywood could sideline women once their youthful glow dimmed, a pattern still being challenged today. The legacy of figures like Elaine Stewart lives on not through grand monuments or political discourse, but through celluloid and television reruns. In her preserved images and performances, we glimpse the values of a time and the constraints placed on talent within a rigid star system. Her death, though quiet, is a reminder of the many artists whose contributions helped shape entertainment, but who now exist mostly in memory or on screen. In the end, the way we remember stars like Stewart, through digital archives, classic film festivals, or cultural retrospectives, reveals humanity's deep desire to hold on to fleeting beauty, artistry, and history. Through such acts of remembrance, we assert that no light, however briefly it burned, goes out entirely. Julian Sands, the British actor renowned for his distinctive voice and elegant screen presence, met a tragic and mysterious end that underscores both the allure and unpredictability of nature, and by extension, life itself. Sands disappeared in January 2023 while hiking alone in the San Gabriel Mountains of Southern California, a rugged area known for sudden weather changes and treacherous terrain. After months of extensive search efforts, his remains were discovered in June 2023. He was 65. His death was accidental, caused by a presumed fall or exposure during inclement weather. Yet, it struck a deeply human chord, particularly for those who admired Sands not just as a performer, but as a man who sought solitude, poetry, and spiritual freedom in the wild. In an era when actors are often overexposed by constant media attention, Sands's private, nature-driven death seemed almost poetic, a stark contrast to his sharply refined on-screen roles and a reflection of his personal reverence for the sublime and unknowable. Sands rose to prominence in the 1980s, most memorably as George Emerson in A Room with a View, a film that championed emotional authenticity over Victorian restraint. His career spanned diverse genres, from romantic period pieces to dark thrillers like Warlock and The Killing Fields, showcasing his versatility and commitment to complex characters. He was an actor unafraid of strangeness or vulnerability, often drawn to roles that explored moral ambiguity and human fragility. The consequences of his passing were not seismic in a global or historical sense, but they resonated deeply within the artistic and literary communities. Sands was a lifelong lover of poetry, especially the works of Shelley and Keats, and frequently recited verse in live performances. His death brought renewed attention to the quieter contributions of actors who, though not always in the Hollywood spotlight, shaped cultural consciousness through consistency and depth. Julian Sands' passing reminds us of humanity's delicate balance with nature and the limits of fame in preserving mortality. He is now remembered through the lens of art and literature, through tributes from colleagues, and in the timeless roles he brought to life. Like the romantics he cherished, Sands' life and death speak to the eternal human quest to find meaning in beauty, danger, and the fleeting passage of time. Carmen Sevilla, the beloved Spanish actress, singer, and television presenter, passed away on June 27, 2023, at the age of 92 from natural causes. Her death marked the end of an era in Spanish entertainment, an era defined by glamour, resilience, and the evolution of media in a country transitioning from dictatorship to democracy. Having spent her final years in a care home battling advanced Alzheimer's disease, Sevilla's death was not sudden, but it carried profound emotional weight for fans across generations who had grown up watching her on stage and screen. Born in 1930, Sevilla rose to fame during the Francoist regime, a time when Spain's cultural expression was heavily censored and stylized under authoritarian control. Within these constraints, she emerged as a symbol of traditional femininity and charm, often starring in folkloric musicals and romantic dramas. However, beyond the archetype she portrayed, Sevilla's career reflected the complexities of performing under a regime that both elevated and limited its artists. Her enduring popularity spoke to the yearning for joy, escapism, and beauty in a repressive society. Sevilla's passing reminded Spain of its artistic heritage, a period when film and music provided subtle forms of resistance and national identity. Though she did not radically shift history in the way political figures might, her role in shaping Spain's cultural consciousness was immense. Her image, draped in mantillas or framed by flamenco rhythms, became iconic. With her death, many felt the curtain fall not just on a person, but on a style, a sound, and a screen presence no longer seen in modern entertainment. The immediate reaction to her death was one of national mourning and remembrance. Tributes poured in from Spain's artistic community and beyond, recalling her elegance, warmth, and contributions to cinema and television. Her legacy is preserved in the vivid Technicolor films of the 1950s and 1960s and in the memories of those who watched her transition from silver screen starlet to a familiar face on Spanish TV. Carmen Sevilla's life and death illuminate humanity's yearning to preserve beauty and identity through memory. In honoring her, Spain reaffirms how art not only reflects history, it endures beyond it. Through film retrospectives, commemorative broadcasts, and public tributes, Sevilla remains immortal, her artistry a permanent part of Spain's cultural soul. Squire, the legendary bassist and co-founder of the progressive rock band Yes, passed away on June 27, 2015, due to acute erythroid leukemia. His death was natural, though sudden, as he had only announced his diagnosis 2 months prior. At 67, Squire was still musically active and had planned to rejoin his bandmates after treatment. His passing not only marked the end of an era for Yes fans, but also underscored the mortality of rock's progressive pioneers, artists who shaped the soundscape of the 20th century through innovation and technical brilliance. Squire's death occurred in a time when classic rock legends were increasingly entering their twilight years, prompting broader conversations about legacy, preservation, and musical heritage. Known for his melodic bass playing, Squire helped redefine the instrument's role in rock music, making it central to both rhythm and harmony in the expansive soundscapes of songs like Roundabout and Close to the Edge. His Rickenbacker bass became iconic, not only for its tone, but also as a symbol of the experimental spirit of the 1970s, a time when musical boundaries were being actively stretched and redrawn. The immediate consequences of Squire's passing were deeply felt in the music world. He was the only member of Yes to have appeared on every studio album up to that point, a symbol of both continuity and creative backbone. His absence forced the band to perform live without him for the first time in its decades-long history, breaking a tradition that had lasted nearly half a century. Tributes poured in from musicians across genres, highlighting the wide-reaching influence of his style and vision. Squire's death amplified his legend in subtle but enduring ways. It recentered appreciation on the often under-acknowledged artistry of the bassist, sparking retrospectives and analyses of his contributions to progressive music. For many, his name became synonymous not just with Yes, but with an entire philosophy of rock that valued complexity, craftsmanship, and exploration. In reflecting on Squire's passing, we are reminded of how art transcends mortality. Though the man is gone, his bass lines echo endlessly, in concert halls, on vinyl, and through the hands of musicians he inspired. Through documentaries, tribute concerts, and inclusion in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Squire has been immortalized, not just as a bassist, but as a creative force who left the music world richer than he found it. Bobby Womack, a soul music icon whose career spanned more than 5 decades, died on June 27, 2014 at the age of 70. His death was due to natural causes, though it followed a long battle with various health issues, including diabetes, cancer, Alzheimer's disease, and pneumonia. Womack's passing marked the end of an era defined by gritty, emotionally raw storytelling through music, an era rooted in the civil rights movement, personal survival, and the ever-evolving voice of Black America. Womack's music, deeply autobiographical, reflected the turbulence and transformation of the time in which he lived. Coming up as a gospel singer before joining Sam Cooke's SAR Records, his life and career were entangled with the promise and tragedy of the 1960s. His controversial marriage to Cooke's widow shortly after the singer's death in 1964 ignited public backlash, foreshadowing a life frequently caught between fame and scandal. Yet, his art always shone through, earning him acclaim with hits like Across 110th Street and If You Think You're Lonely Now, songs that captured urban hardship and emotional truth with unparalleled grit. His death didn't create a political or cultural shift akin to the assassination of a head of state, but it resonated profoundly in the music world. Artists across generations, including the Rolling Stones, for whom he wrote It's All Over Now, and Damon Albarn, with whom he collaborated in his later years, paid tribute to his voice and songwriting. The timing of his death, amid a digital age increasingly distant from soul's analog roots, sparked a renewed interest in the organic storytelling style Womack embodied. His passing became a reminder of the vulnerability and depth that once dominated music charts. Bobby Womack's legend was only amplified after death. His 2009 induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame had already begun a revival of interest in his legacy. In death, documentaries, reissues, and tributes helped frame him not just as a soul singer, but as a survivor, a man who weathered personal demons and industry politics to keep his truth alive in song. Womack's passing reminds us that mortality often enhances the clarity with which we view an artist's truth. Power, in his case, wasn't political, it was emotional. And memory, shaped by his voice, lives on not just in records, but in the emotional resonance that art leaves behind. Through song, Bobby Womack remains a witness to struggle, love, and resilience, immortalized not by monuments but by music. Linda Crystalall, the Argentine-American actress who gained fame during the golden age of westerns, passed away on June 27, 2020, at the age of 89. Her death was reported as natural causes at her home in Beverly Hills, quietly closing the final chapter of a life once filled with cinematic passion and pioneering spirit. Crystall's career reflected a transitional period in Hollywood, one in which ethnic representation was scarce, and Latina actresses often had to navigate rigid stereotypes to carve a space on the silver screen. Best known for her role as Victoria Cannon on the television series The High Chaparral, Crystalall broke barriers by portraying a Mexican aristocrat with complexity, grace, and strength. Her death, while not shocking or controversial, symbolized the fading of an era in which actors of color fought to be taken seriously in mainstream media. In many ways, her passing represented not just the loss of a beloved performer, but the end of a generation of trailblazing women who challenged a predominantly white and male Hollywood. Crystall's legacy had already begun to fade by the time of her death, given her retirement in the 1980s and long absence from the public eye. However, her passing sparked a renewed appreciation for her work, especially among audiences revisiting classic television. The significance of her role in The High Chaparral, a rare instance in which a Latina was given a dignified and leading role during that period, was re-evaluated in light of contemporary conversations about representation and inclusion in media. Her death did not shift the trajectory of global history, yet it served as a moment of reflection for the entertainment world. It prompted critics and fans alike to consider the quiet battles actors like Crystalall waged behind the scenes, to be heard, seen, and remembered not just for beauty, but for talent and cultural significance. In remembering Linda Crystalall, we are reminded that mortality does not erase legacy, it transforms it. Power, in her case, came through persistence and grace under limitation. Memory, meanwhile, finds life in the roles she played, the boundaries she pushed, and the conversations her presence inspired. Through reruns, retrospectives, and the voices of those she inspired, Crystalall remains immortalized not in marble, but in celluloid and memory, a symbol of both the glamour and grit of old Hollywood. Bud Spencer, born Carlo Pedersoli, passed away on June 27, 2016, from natural causes at the age of 86. His death marked the end of an era for fans of Italian cinema, especially those who grew up watching his iconic roles in spaghetti westerns and action comedy films alongside his longtime partner Terence Hill. Spencer's passing was peaceful, reflecting a life lived largely on his own terms, far from the violent or tragic ends that often befell many of his cinematic characters. Spencer's death reflected both the values and challenges of his era, a time when European cinema was carving its unique identity amid Hollywood's global dominance. His on-screen persona, a burly, good-hearted tough guy with a knack for humor, captured a popular archetype of the 1960s and 70s, blending strength with charm and relatability. His roles often emphasized justice, loyalty, and an everyman's sense of fairness, qualities highly prized in post-war Europe's cultural landscape, which was eager for heroes who were approachable rather than untouchable. The immediate consequences of his death were deeply felt within the film community and by generations of fans across Europe and beyond. Social media tributes flooded in, celebrating not just the actor, but the man himself, a former Olympic swimmer and aviator turned beloved film star. While his death did not shift the course of history in a political or social sense, it amplified his legend, reminding audiences of the joy and escapism his films provided during times of social and economic uncertainty. Bud Spencer's passing illuminated a universal human truth: how mortality spares no one, yet memory can transform a finite life into an enduring legacy. His life and career are immortalized through his films, which continue to be celebrated in festivals, retrospectives, and fan communities worldwide. Beyond the screen, his story is preserved through biographies, documentaries, and the affectionate recollections of colleagues and admirers. Ultimately, Spencer's death reveals humanity's profound desire to preserve power and identity through memory and culture. Through art, whether cinema, literature, or oral history, we keep alive figures like Bud Spencer, not just as entertainers, but as symbols of resilience, humor, and humanity. His legacy, much like his characters, remains a comforting presence in an ever-changing world, reminding us that strength paired with kindness endures far beyond the final curtain.